If there was a world record for the fastest way a heart could snap in half, I'm pretty sure I set it that night. It was a Thursday, one of those gray, forgettable weekdays when the sky feels too tired to even rain properly. I had spent most of the evening at home, sitting on our ugly green couch, flipping through TV channels I wasn't really watching. Our golden retriever, Jasper, snored at my feet, oblivious to how unsettled I felt. My wife, Lacey, had texted me earlier saying she was working late. Something about a surprise project her office had to rush before the weekend. I didn't think much of it. Lacey was always the overachiever type. Late hours were just part of the package. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But something gnawed at me. Maybe it was the way her last few kisses felt, hollow. Maybe it was how quickly she pulled away from my hugs lately, like I was a stranger renting space in her life. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something big, and it scared the hell out of me. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I decided to surprise her at work. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and headed out into the night, the cold biting at my face as if warning me to turn around. Maybe if I had listened to the wind's whisper, I could have spared myself what came next. I parked across from the office building, expecting to see a light or two still glowing inside. Instead, the place was dark, locked up like any other after-hours building. No cars in the lot. No late-night meetings. Just silence. That's when I noticed a familiar shape down the block. Lacey's blue sedan, parked outside a trendy little bistro we had talked about trying for months, but never got around to. A stupid voice inside me said, maybe she grabbed dinner with coworkers? Another voice, sharper and crueler, said, you already know. Still, I walked toward the restaurant, heart pounding so hard it felt like it rattled my bones. As I pushed open the door, the warm buzz of conversation and the clinking of glasses washed over me. The smells of grilled steak and wine hit me, making my stomach twist. I scanned the room and froze. There she was. Lacey, my Lacey, sitting across from a man in a charcoal suit, his hand casually resting on hers. They weren't talking about work. They weren't even pretending. Her eyes, those bright, fierce eyes I fell in love with, were locked onto his like he was the only person in the universe. I stood there, invisible, for a long, miserable second. Maybe if I had been stronger, I would have turned around and left. But something broke inside me. Something I couldn't glue back together with logic or excuses. I slipped my wedding ring off my finger, the metal suddenly feeling too heavy to bear, and crossed the room, each step carving a canyon between who I thought we were and who we had actually become. Without a word, I placed the ring on their table, right between their wine glasses, right next to the damn candle flickering like it was mocking me. Lacey's head snapped up. Her face went ghost white. The man stiffened like he had been caught with his hand in the till. But I didn't give either of them the satisfaction of hearing my voice crack. I looked her straight in the eye and said, softly but clearly, you don't have to come home. Then I turned, walked out into the frozen night, and let the door swing shut behind me. The worst part? That was just the beginning. The cold hit me harder once I was outside. It wasn't just the weather, it was the silence. The kind of silence that makes your own breathing sound too loud. I stood there on the sidewalk, hands buried deep in my jacket pockets, staring at nothing. Cars passed. People laughed. Life moved on around me like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I felt like I had been hit by a freight train. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to march back into that restaurant and demand answers, make a scene, throw their wine glasses against the wall. But instead, I just stood there, numb. Because deep down, I already had all the answers I needed. Lacey had chosen him. Whether it was for one night or for good didn't even matter. The choice was made the moment she let another man hold her hand like it belonged to him. I wandered to my car without even remembering moving my legs. The seat was cold against my back as I slumped into it. For a few minutes, I just sat there, staring blankly through the windshield. My wedding ring finger felt naked, like it was screaming that something was missing, that everything was wrong now. It took me 3 tries to start the car. My hands were shaking too badly. Finally, the engine roared to life, and I drove. Nowhere in particular, just drove. Through empty neighborhoods, past glowing storefronts, past the gas station where we used to stop for late-night snacks. Everything felt like it belonged to someone else now, like I was a tourist in my own life. I ended up at the beach, of all places. A cold, empty stretch of sand under a black sky. I parked and walked down to the shore, the icy wind whipping through my jacket, I pulled it tighter around me but didn't turn back. I just stood there, staring at the waves crashing against the rocks. I thought about every moment that had led to this. Every birthday we celebrated. Every lazy Sunday morning tangled up in bed. Every promise whispered late at night. Were they all lies? Or was there some invisible expiration date on love that I had missed? I sat down in the sand, letting the cold seep into my bones. Jasper's face flashed in my mind, our dog, sleeping peacefully at home, waiting for two people who didn't exist anymore. I realized I wasn't just losing Lacey. I was losing a whole version of my future I had built in my head, brick by brick. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the spell. For a second, I thought about ignoring it, about throwing it into the ocean and letting the waves carry away everything. But curiosity won. I pulled it out and saw her name blinking on the screen. Lacey. I stared at it until the screen went dark. She texted again. And again. Then she called. I let it ring until it went a voicemail. Then again. Then again. Until finally, with hands colder than the sand beneath me, I tapped the screen and answered. I didn't say a word. I just listened. And what I heard on the other end of the line changed everything I thought I knew about betrayal. The line crackled faintly as I pressed the phone to my ear, but Lacey didn't speak at first. I could hear her breathing, shaky and fast, like she had just run a marathon. I said nothing. I wanted to hear what she would say without prompting. I wanted the truth to come crawling out of her mouth, no matter how ugly it was. Finally, her voice broke through, fragile and trembling. Finn, please, it's not what it looked like. I almost laughed. Not what it looked like. I had seen her hand in his. I had seen the way she leaned into him, the way she smiled. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was choice. Intention. Betrayal dressed up in candlelight and laughter. Still, I didn't hang up. Some pathetic part of me needed to hear her out, needed her to admit it so the wound could have a name. It wasn't planned, she stammered. He's just a friend from work. It just got confusing. We had a drink, and it meant nothing, I swear. Please, Finn, come home. Let's talk. Please. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the car seat, feeling the weight of every word settle on me like wet cement. A friend from work. Confusing. Meant nothing. All the cliches I used to roll my eyes at when I heard other people say them were now being weaponized against me. I stayed silent long enough that she started crying. I could hear her sobs, sharp, frantic gasps that once would have cracked my heart wide open. But now, they just sounded distant, like a song playing in another room. You left your ring, she whispered. Finn, please, don't do this to us. Don't do this to us? I thought. You did this to us. Without thinking, I pulled the phone away from my ear and ended the call. Her crying cut off instantly, leaving me alone again with nothing but the sound of the ocean grinding against the rocks. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and buried my face in my hands, my breath hitching in my throat. That's when it hit me. I had no plan. I had walked out of that restaurant on pure instinct, fueled by anger and heartbreak. But now I had no idea what to do. Go home? Pack a bag? Sleep in the car? Drive until I found a town where no one knew my name? Part of me wanted to believe her. To chalk it up to a drunken mistake, a stupid lapse in judgment. To go home, yell at each other, cry, slam doors, and somehow stitch the wreckage back together. But a bigger part of me, maybe the real part, knew better. Trust was glass. Once shattered, it might get glued back together, but the cracks would always show. I sat there until the stars disappeared behind a thick veil of clouds and the first hint of dawn started bleeding into the sky. It was then, as the world around me slowly began to wake up, that I made a decision. I wasn't going back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And just as that thought anchored itself deep inside me, my phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't Lacey. It was an unknown number. And the message it brought? It shattered the last piece of hope I had left. The notification glowed on the screen, slicing through the darkness like a blade. One new message from an unknown number. No name. No picture. Just a simple, cold text that made my heart hammer against my ribs harder than before. You deserve to know the whole truth. If you want proof, meet me at 7th and Holloway. Come alone. I stared at the words, my mind refusing to process them for a few seconds. Was this a joke? A scam? Some cruel prank designed to kick me while I was already lying broken on the ground? But deep down, I knew there was nothing random about this. Someone knew what happened tonight. Someone knew more than I did. And if there was even the slightest chance I could drag the full truth into the light, I had to take it. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 2:19 a.m. 7th and Holloway wasn't far, maybe a 15-minute drive. Just on the outskirts of town, near the old industrial district where factories sat abandoned and graffiti bloomed like weeds on every brick wall. Not exactly the kind of place you went for heart-to-hearts. Still, without allowing myself another second to hesitate, I threw the car into gear and pulled away from the beach. The roads were almost empty, just the occasional taxi flashing by or a stray cat darting across the street. Every streetlight I passed cast a sickly yellow glow on the wet pavement, making the world feel even lonelier than it already was. As I approached 7th and Holloway, my stomach twisted tighter. There, under a flickering streetlight, stood a figure in a dark hoodie, leaning casually against a dinted blue sedan. They didn't wave. They didn't move. Just waited, like they had all the time in the world. I parked a few spaces away, heart pounding in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, drive away, forget this whole nightmare. But curiosity and the desperate need for answers kept me moving forward. The figure straightened as I approached. Up close, I could see it was a young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, with sharp eyes that seemed to cut right through me. "You're Finn, right?" she said, her voice low and even. I nodded cautiously. "Who are you?" She hesitated, glancing around the deserted street before speaking. "Let's just say I know Lacey. And I know what she's been doing." I swallowed hard. "How?" The woman pulled out her phone and, without a word, tapped a few times before handing it to me. I took it, my fingers trembling slightly, and stared at the screen. There, in full color, were photos, dozens of them. Lacey and the man from the restaurant, but not just holding hands or flirting. These were pictures taken over weeks, maybe months. Different places, different outfits, different dates, kisses stolen in parking lots, secret meetings at bars, hotel rooms. My vision blurred for a moment as the images burned into my brain. The life I thought I had, the marriage I thought was solid, was nothing more than a stage set for a play I wasn't even a character in. I handed the phone back, my hands aching from how tightly I had been gripping it. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The woman's gaze softened, just a little. "Because you're not the only one she's hurt. And because you deserve to stop living in the dark." I wanted to ask more, needed to ask more, but my throat was closing up, words dying before they reached my lips. "One more thing," she said, pulling something from her jacket pocket, a small flash drive. She pressed it into my hand. This is everything. Messages. Videos. You'll want to see it when you're ready." Before I could say anything else, she turned, climbed into her car, and drove off, leaving me standing alone under the flickering streetlight, the flash drive burning a hole in my palm. I didn't even remember getting back to my car. Didn't remember the drive home. All I knew was that by the time I stumbled into the house, Jasper barking excitedly at the door, my life had become unrecognizable. And sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, flash drive plugged in, I braced myself for the kind of truth you don't come back from. The kitchen felt colder than outside, even though the heat was on. Jasper circled my feet, whining softly, sensing that something was wrong. I reached down and scratched behind his ears, trying to calm both of us, but my hand was shaking too hard to hide it. I sat down heavily at the table, my body moving on autopilot as I opened the laptop and waited for it to boot up. The flash drive clicked softly when I pushed it into the port. A single folder popped up on the screen, labeled simply, "Truth." I hovered the mouse over it for a long time, the screen's pale glow painting my face in sickly colors. Part of me still wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding, a cruel mistake. That I'd open the folder and find, what, exactly? Evidence that she had been planning a surprise party for me? That it was some elaborate misunderstanding that would end with laughter and apologies? But that part of me was dying. Quickly, I double-clicked. Inside were videos, text messages, voicemails, photos, dates stamped clearly at the top of each file, going back nearly 8 months. 8 months. Nearly a year of betrayal unfolding behind my back while I walked around blind, trusting her, loving her, believing in a life that no longer existed. I opened one of the videos. It was security camera footage from a cheap motel parking lot. The timestamp showed it was from just 2 weeks ago. The grainy footage showed Lacey's car pulling in. Seconds later, the man from the restaurant appeared. He got into her car. Their silhouettes moved together instantly, too fast, too familiar, and my stomach churned. I slammed the laptop shut so hard the dishes on the table rattled. Jasper whimpered, and I whispered an apology, running a hand over my face. I felt nauseous. Betrayed wasn't even the right word anymore. Betrayed was too small, too simple. This was something uglier. Something that poisoned every memory I had of her. I needed air. I needed space. I grabbed my jacket and stumbled out into the night without even locking the door behind me. My feet carried me down the sidewalk, past our neighbors' houses, houses filled with sleeping families, lives still intact, hearts still whole. I ended up at the park a few blocks away. It was deserted, of course. The old swings creaked softly in the wind, a sound that had always been oddly comforting to me before. Tonight, it felt like the world itself was mocking me. I sat down on a frozen bench and stared up at the sky. No stars. Just endless, choking gray. I thought about all the times I had defended Lacey when people doubted her. When friends raised eyebrows at how often she stayed late at work. When my brother joked once, half serious, that she was way too good at finding reasons to be out. I had gotten angry. Furious. I had fought for her honor like a fool. And she had been laughing behind my back the entire time. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw another message from her. A wall of text, desperate, pleading, full of all the right words lined up in the wrong order. Apologies. Regrets. Promises. Please come home. Please let's talk. Please remember how good we were. I dropped the phone onto the bench beside me without reading the rest. How good we were. I didn't even know what was real anymore. Every memory I tried to hold on to slipped through my fingers like sand. Was she lying even back then? When she said she loved me? When she promised forever? The wind picked up, stinging my face, but I didn't move. I sat there until my hands went numb and my legs ached from the cold. I knew, deep down, that I couldn't stay here, lost in this moment forever. There were decisions to be made, futures to reshape. But sitting there on that frozen bench, all I could do was grieve the life I thought I had. The life that had died without me even noticing. Tomorrow, I would have to act. Tomorrow, I would have to confront her. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, all I could do was sit in the ruins and mourn. Morning crept in like an uninvited guest, cold and heavy. I hadn't slept at all. At some point, I dragged myself back home, but I couldn't bring myself to walk inside. I sat in my car in the driveway, watching the windows of the house we once called ours. It looked exactly the same as it always had, but it wasn't home anymore. It was just walls and a roof covering a life I no longer recognized. As the first weak light of day spilled across the street, I realized I had to move. I couldn't hide forever. I couldn't sit paralyzed in the driveway like some ghost clinging to a past that didn't want me anymore. I went inside, moving mechanically, grabbing a duffel bag from the hall closet. I packed quickly, bare essentials. A few changes of clothes, my laptop, Jasper's leash. I didn't even think about taking anything sentimental. It all felt poison now. Every photo, every keepsake, every gift exchanged over the years, they weren't memories anymore. They were just evidence of how blind I had been. As I zipped the bag shut, Jasper whined, tail wagging uncertainly. He knew something was wrong. I crouched down and rubbed his head, whispering, "You're coming with me, buddy. Wherever we end up." I grabbed his food, some toys, and his worn blue blanket, stuffing them into a second bag. It was the first decision that felt right in days. Before I left, I did one last thing. I took off my watch, another gift from Lacey, engraved with our anniversary date, and left it on the kitchen counter next to my wedding ring, which I had dropped into the gift bag at the restaurant. Two symbols of promises that meant nothing now, sitting there like relics in a museum of broken trust. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe her that much. Jasper jumped into the passenger seat as I started the car. I backed out of the driveway for what I knew was the last time and didn't look back. The plan was simple: drive until the city disappeared in the rearview mirror, find a motel that allowed dogs, and figure out my next move from there. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than staying in a place where every corner whispered betrayal. A couple of hours later, I pulled into a tired-looking roadside motel off the highway. The kind of place with peeling paint, flickering signs, and carpets that smelled permanently damp. Perfect for someone who didn't want to be found. The woman at the front desk barely looked up as I checked in, handing me a plastic keycard without so much as a smile. I took the room on the far end of the lot, near a patch of scraggly trees where Jasper could run a little. Once inside, I dropped the bags on the floor and collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the cracked ceiling. Jasper curled up beside me with a soft sigh, sensing my exhaustion. I pulled out my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to open the flash drive again, to watch every disgusting detail, to rub salt into wounds that hadn't even scabbed over yet. Another part of me, maybe the smarter part, Knew that no new piece of information was going to make this hurt less. But before I could decide, my phone buzzed again. Not a call this time. An email. From Lacey. The subject line was short. Brutal. I made a mistake. Please read. I stared at it for a long time, the words blurring as my vision swam. She was still trying. Still clinging to the wreckage. Still pretending like there was anything left to save. But it wasn't the email that twisted my gut. It was the attached file. A voice recording. And against every shred of good judgment I had left, I tapped it open. Her voice filled the room, raw and broken. And what she said next wasn't an apology. It wasn't an explanation. It was a confession that ripped the ground out from under me all over again. The recording started with a long, shaky breath. Then Lacey's voice filled the room, stripped of its usual sharpness, quieter, rawer. If you're listening to this, I guess it means you saw everything, she said, pausing like she was trying to find words she should have said long ago. I didn't plan for any of it to happen. It just did. I leaned back against the wall, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on me. Jasper shifted at my feet, sensing the tension. I met him 6 months ago, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. At first, it was innocent. Just someone to talk to. Someone who made me feel noticed. I didn't mean to cross any lines. I swear, Finn, I didn't wake up one day thinking I wanted to destroy everything we had. She took another shaky breath. But I did. I let it happen. I let myself believe it wasn't that bad because he made me feel something I thought I lost a long time ago. I blamed you for it, unfairly. I told myself you didn't see me anymore, didn't hear me. I convinced myself that what I was doing was understandable. The room felt smaller with every word. I pressed my palms against my thighs to keep from shaking. But it wasn't, she whispered. It wasn't understandable. It was cruel. It was selfish. And you didn't deserve it. Another pause, a choked sob escaping her. You were good to me, Finn. You were better than I ever deserved. I closed my eyes. It was strange, almost funny in a sick way. All the times I had doubted myself, wondering if I had failed her somehow, if I had stopped being enough, and now, here she was, admitting it had nothing to do with me. It was her all along. I tried to end it, she said. I tried more than once. But every time I tried, I couldn't walk away. I kept lying to myself. To him. To you. I thought I could juggle it all. That somehow no one would get hurt. She sniffed loudly. But you did. And it's my fault. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. I wanted you to hear it from me. Not from some stranger. I'm sorry, Finn. I'm so sorry. The recording ended abruptly, leaving a hollow silence in its place. I sat there for a long time, staring at the laptop screen even though it had gone dark. The apology didn't make me feel better. It didn't offer closure. It was like pouring salt into a wound and calling it medicine. She wasn't sorry for what she did, she was sorry she got caught. She was sorry the fantasy life she had built on lies was crumbling around her. I stood up and paced the tiny room, feeling caged in by everything, the walls, the memories, the weight of it all. I knew she would keep reaching out. I knew there would be more texts, more emails, more desperate apologies. She would promise change. She would swear up and down that she could fix this, that we could fix this. But some things aren't meant to be repaired. Some things are better left broken. I grabbed my jacket and Jasper's leash. I needed to move, to breathe, to clear the poison from my lungs. We stepped out into the pale morning light, the motel parking lot empty except for a few beat-up cars and a crow pecking at something near the trash cans. I walked Jasper through the streets of the sleepy town, letting him sniff every post and lamppost along the way. The world felt quieter here. Simpler. It was the first time in days that my mind wasn't screaming at me from every corner. When we returned to the motel, I found another message waiting on my phone. But it wasn't from Lacey. It was from an unknown number again. And this one said only, "You don't know the whole story. Meet me again. You need to hear the rest." I stared at the message, heart thudding painfully in my chest. Because somehow, deep down, I knew they were right. And that the worst part of the story hadn't even been told yet. For a long moment, I just stared at the new message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it, to shut the door forever on anything connected to Lacey and her tangled mess of lies. But another part of me, the part that had learned better than to ignore red flags, knew I couldn't move forward with half the truth still hanging over me. So I texted back a single word. "Where?" The reply came almost immediately. "Same place. Tonight. 8 p.m. The day dragged on like an old wound reopening every time I tried to relax. I took Jasper for long walks, trying to clear my head, trying to prepare myself for whatever revelation was waiting for me. By the time the sun dipped behind the barren trees, I was ready not for pain, but for finality. I drove to the meeting spot, parking under the same flickering streetlight. The woman was already there, leaning against her car, arms crossed against the cold. She looked tired, but determined. "You came," she said, her voice soft. "I need to know everything," I replied. She nodded and pulled out her phone again, showing me a series of messages, screenshots this time. But they weren't between Lacey and the man from the restaurant. They were between Lacey and someone else entirely. Someone I never would have expected. Her best friend, Molly. The messages made my stomach twist. Not because they revealed more betrayal between Lacey and another man, but because they revealed a cold, calculated truth. The man from the restaurant wasn't some accidental fling. He was part of a plan. A plan Lacey and Molly had cooked up together to manipulate me into feeling worthless, to make me chase after Lacey, to rekindle her excitement by making her feel desirable again. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about passion. It was a game, and I had been nothing more than a pawn. As the full weight of it settled on my shoulders, something inside me shifted. I didn't feel crushed. I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Because none of it had ever been about me not being enough. It had never been about me failing. It had always been about her insecurities, her selfishness, her own brokenness. I thanked the woman quietly and drove away without looking back. No rage, no revenge plans swirling in my head. Just a pure, strange lightness I hadn't felt in months. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed, Jasper resting his head on my knee, looking up at me with those wise, patient eyes. "I think it's time, buddy," I said, scratching behind his ear. The next morning, I packed our things, checked out, and hit the road. Not running away this time, but moving forward. Every mile I put between me and the past felt like a breath of fresh air filling my lungs. I didn't know exactly where we were heading. Someplace new. Someplace simple. Maybe a small town where Jasper could have a yard, and I could find a job that didn't drain my soul dry. Maybe I'd take up something I always wanted to try, like woodworking or coaching a little league team. What mattered was that I was finally living for me. Not for her approval. Not for some crumbling idea of forever. Just for the man who deserved better. The man who finally realized his worth. And somewhere along that long open road, with the windows down and Jasper's ears flapping in the breeze, I finally smiled, not the broken, bitter kind, but a real, honest smile. Because for the first time in a long, long while, I knew I was going to be okay. Better than okay. I was free.